"You don't own this land anymore." That's what she said to me, standing on my property with papers in her hand. She insisted the development had been legally approved. I'd been gone for a year, caring for my dying mother. 2 states away, I came back to find my 240 acres of forest transformed into 96 mansions. But here's the thing about spending 15 years as a geological survey engineer. You learn to spot a boundary violation from a mile away. And this was the mother of all violations. The old fence line had vanished. The survey markers had been moved. Leave a comment below if you're watching this on your phone or computer, because what happened next became the most satisfying legal battle I've ever witnessed. The drive up Route 47 should have been muscle memory. Pine trees, gravel access road, 240 acres. My father bought in 1983, when he passed. The deed came to me along with a survey from 1992 that I kept in a fireproof safe. 15 years of verifying land boundaries for mining operations taught me to know every corner marker, every easement, every foot of a property line by heart. I'd left in March of last year when Mom's cancer came back. My sister called and said, "Come now, not next week." So I locked up the cabin I'd built near the eastern edge, filed mail forwarding, and drove to Pennsylvania. The doctors gave her 6 months. She made it to 14. By the time I got back in the truck this May, I was exhausted, grieving, and ready for the silence only your own land can provide. The first wrong note came at the Route 47 turn. New paved road where my gravel drive should have been. Clean blacktop, curbed edges, a street sign reading Riverside Meadows Drive. I checked my phone's GPS. Coordinates matched. I took the turn. What I saw next made my hands lock on the steering wheel. Houses. Rows of 2-story colonial mansions. Each one maybe 4,000 square feet. Manicured lawns, young trees in uniform intervals. Mailboxes with numbers. Cars in driveways. Children on bicycles riding smooth sidewalks that had not existed 14 months ago. At the entrance, a massive stone sign announces Riverside Meadows, a gated HOA community. I drove the planned loop slowly, counting 96 houses, all occupied or near completion. Construction crews worked on the last few near the back. Nail guns are firing. A dump truck is reversing. My chest tightened. You can't build 96 houses on someone's land without permits, surveys, title searches, and notifications. Something had gone catastrophically wrong or catastrophically right, depending on who you asked. I parked in front of a modular building labeled HOA Management Office and grabbed the folder from my glove box. Deed copy, survey copy, property tax receipt, paid in full. I got out. A woman in her mid-50s stepped out before I reached the door. Navy blazer, khaki pants, the uniform of suburban authority. Her smile was bright and practiced. "Can I help you?" Friendly tone. But her eyes assessed me quickly. I didn't look like a buyer. I looked like a man who'd been driving 9 hours and hadn't slept well in 14 months. "I'm looking for an explanation," I said, gesturing at the houses. "This is my land, 240 acres. I'd like to know what's going on here." Her smile held, but her posture shifted. She straightened slightly. "I think there's been some confusion. Sir, this development was approved by the county over a year ago. We have all the proper permits and title clearances. Can I ask your name? Russell Hampton. And there's no confusion. I have the deed right here." I held up the folder. She glanced at it without reaching for it. That refusal to even look told me something. "Mr. Hampton, I'm Francine Blackwood, president of the Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. I can assure you our legal team conducted a full title search before breaking ground." She paused, her tone taking on a rehearsed sympathy. "If you believe there's been an error, I'd be happy to provide our attorney's contact information, but this development is entirely legal." The smoothness of her deflection made my jaw tighten. She wasn't denying a problem might exist. She was redirecting responsibility away from herself. "Ms. Blackwood, I never sold this land. I never signed anything. Your legal team made a serious mistake, and you need to stop construction while we figure out how this happened." Her expression cooled by a degree. "Mr. Hampton, if you have concerns about the title, you'll need to take that up with the county recorder's office. We purchased this land through a legitimate transaction. If someone misrepresented ownership, that's between you and them. We're buyers here, acting in good faith. There it was. Good faith purchaser. A legal shield. If they could prove they bought without knowledge of title defects, they might keep the land, even if the sale was fraudulent. Whoever sold my property had covered their tracks well enough to fool a title company. I stood on what should have been the forest floor, looking at this woman armored in paperwork and procedure. Behind her, a crew finished the roof on House 94. Hammers echoed. A lawnmower started somewhere. The surreal nightmare sharpened into clarity. This wasn't going to be simple. This was going to be a war, fought with documents and depositions. And I was standing at the opening shot with nothing but a folder and 15 years of knowing how to read a survey map. "I'll be back," I said quietly. "With a lawyer." She nodded, her smile returning like a mask sliding into place. "Of course. We're always happy to cooperate with legitimate inquiries." And the word legitimate hung in the air like a challenge. I turned and walked back to my truck, feeling her eyes on my back. As I drove out through the gates of Riverside Meadows, past houses built on land I'd paid taxes on for decades, one thought crystallized. They'd made a mistake letting me see this. They'd made a bigger mistake finishing construction, because every nail they drove, every shingle they laid, every dollar they poured into these 96 mansions was adding value to property they didn't own. And when I proved that in court, all of it would become leverage. I spent the next morning at the county building department, a squat brick structure that smelled like old coffee and copy toner. The clerk at the front desk was a tired-looking woman in her 40s who barely glanced up when I explained what I needed. "I want to see all permits filed for development on parcel number 873-42-009, I said, sliding my property tax statement across the counter. She typed slowly, squinting at her screen. "Riverside Meadows?" she asked. I nodded. She printed a thick stack of documents and pushed them toward me. $15 for copies. I paid and took the stack to a table by the window. The permits were extensive. Site plans, grading permits, utility hookups, and building permits for 96 individual structures. Everything stamped and approved. The application date was April of last year, barely a month after I'd left for Pennsylvania. The listed applicant was Riverside Development Group, LLC. The listed property owner for the parcel was also Riverside Development Group, LLC. I stared at that line until my vision blurred. Someone had transferred my deed into the name of a shell company, and the county had accepted it without question. I flipped to the attached documentation. There was a deed transfer recorded in March of last year. The signature on the transfer document was supposed to be mine. I'd never seen it before in my life. My actual signature was loose, slanted. This one was stiff and upright, like someone had traced my name from a printed document. I drove straight to the county recorder's office 2 blocks away and requested a certified copy of the deed transfer. The woman behind the counter pulled it from their files within minutes. When I pointed out that I'd been out of state when this was supposedly signed, she listened with professional detachment. "If you believe this is fraudulent, you'll need to file a complaint with the district attorney's office. We just record what's submitted. We don't verify signatures unless it's notarized. And this one is." She tapped the notary seal at the bottom. The notary's name was Gerald Hutchins. License number visible. Stamp clear. "Can you tell me if this notary is still active?" I asked. She typed for a moment. "He is. Works out of an office on Maple Street downtown. I should have gone to a lawyer first. That's what a smart person would have done. But anger has its own logic, and I wanted to see this notary's face when I asked him how he'd witnessed a signature I never made. The office was on the 2nd floor of a converted house, the kind of place that rents to accountants and solo practitioners. The door had a plastic sign, Gerald Hutchins, Notary Public and Document Services. I knocked twice and opened the door. A man in his 50s sat behind a desk covered in file folders. He looked up with a practiced smile. "Good afternoon. Do you have an appointment?" he asked. "No," I said, stepping inside and closing the door behind me. "I'm Russell Hampton. You notarized a deed transfer with my signature last March. I need you to explain how that happened because I never signed that document." The smile faltered. He glanced down at his desk, shuffling a few papers as if buying time to think. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hampton, but I notarize dozens of documents every week. Without seeing the specific paperwork, I can't really comment on any particular transaction." His voice had gone careful, measured. I pulled out the copy of the deed transfer and placed it on his desk. "This one, March 18th of last year, a 240-acre land transfer worth millions. You're telling me you don't remember that?" He picked up the document, and I watched his eyes scan it. His jaw tightened. When he looked back up, the polite facade was cracking. "Look, I verify IDs and watch people sign. That's my job. If someone presented a valid ID and signed in front of me, I did my duty. If there's a problem with the document itself, that's a legal matter between you and whoever brought it to me." The shift from vague to defensive told me he remembered it. "Who brought you this document?" I asked. He set the paper down and folded his hands. "I'm not required to disclose that information to you. If you have a legal complaint, you need to file it through proper channels. I've done nothing wrong." The words came out too fast, too rehearsed. I leaned forward slightly. "You notarized a forged signature on a multi-million-dollar property transfer. Either you were careless or you were complicit. Which one is it?" His face flushed. "I think you should leave. If you continue to harass me, I'll call the authorities." I straightened, keeping my voice level. "You'll be hearing from my attorney and the district attorney's office." I walked out before the adrenaline turned into something I'd regret. Outside, I sat in my truck and called the only lawyer I knew personally, a guy named Theodore Brennan, who'd handled my father's estate. He listened to my story without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Russell, this is complicated. If they're claiming good faith purchaser status, even proving the deed was forged might not get your land back immediately. You're looking at years of litigation." His words landed like stones. "But it's my land," I said. "I have the original deed. I have tax records going back decades." He sighed. "I know, and you'll win eventually, but the law protects buyers who purchase property in good faith. If they can show they did their due diligence and had no reason to know the deed was fraudulent, a court might let them keep possession while you sue whoever forged the transfer. It's meant to protect innocent buyers, but it can tie things up for years." The injustice of it burned in my chest. "So they can just build 96 houses on stolen land, and I have to wait years to get it back." Theodore's voice softened. "Not necessarily. Here's what you do. File a lis pendens immediately. That's a notice of pending litigation that gets recorded against the property. It won't stop construction, but it'll cloud the title. No bank will finance mortgages on those houses. No buyer will close on a sale. It freezes their investment. Then we gather every piece of evidence showing continuous ownership, tax payments, utility records, maintenance records, anything proving you never abandoned the property. We'll need a handwriting expert to analyze that signature, and we need to find out who owns Riverside Development Group. Shell companies have owners. Someone orchestrated this, and when we find them, we go after them for fraud." Something in his tone shifted, and I caught it. "You said the lis pendens won't stop construction. Why would I want them to keep building?" There was a pause, and I could almost hear him smiling. "Because, Russell, every dollar they spend improving that property increases its value. If you prove it's yours, you don't just get back raw land. You get back 240 acres of finished development with infrastructure, utilities, roads, and 96 completed houses. Or you negotiate a settlement where they pay you fair market value for what it's worth now, not what it was worth as timber. Either way, letting them finish works in your favor. They think they're building equity. They're actually building yours." The strategic clarity of it cut through my anger like a cold blade. They thought they were securing an investment. They were inflating the value of property they'd never legally acquired. "When can we file the lis pendens?" I asked. "I'll draft it today and have it recorded by tomorrow morning," Theodore said. "And Russell, one more thing. Don't talk to anyone involved in this. Not the HOA, not the construction company, not the notary again. Everything goes through me now. Anything you say can be twisted to argue you accepted the situation or delayed filing a claim." I agreed and hung up. That night I drove back out to Riverside Meadows and parked across the street, just outside the development entrance. I sat there in the dark, watching lights come on in windows, families moving through their evening routines, kids doing homework at kitchen tables, someone grilling on a back patio. These people had no idea they were living on disputed property. They'd signed mortgages, moved furniture, and enrolled their kids in local schools. They were victims too, caught between my stolen land and whoever orchestrated the fraud. But that didn't change the math. Every single one of those houses sat on a parcel I'd never agreed to sell. I thought about Theodore's advice. Let them finish. Let them sink millions into infrastructure and construction. It felt ruthlessly practical, the kind of patience that comes from understanding how systems work and how to use them. I remembered Francine Blackwood's smooth deflection, her refusal to even glance at my documents, the confidence in her voice when she said the development was entirely legal. Good faith or not, someone at the top of this chain knew exactly what they were doing, and I was going to prove it, one filing at a time. The anger was still there, but it had crystallized into something colder and more useful. Strategy, patience, the long game. Theodore filed the lis pendens on a Wednesday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, the phone calls started. First, it was Francine Blackwood, her voice tight with controlled anger. Theodore's secretary forwarded the message to me. The HOA president wanted to discuss this misunderstanding immediately. Then it was a lawyer representing Riverside Development Group, leaving a voicemail about frivolous claims and potential countersuits. Theodore listened to the recordings and smiled. "They're panicking," he said. "That filing just told every bank and title company there's a serious ownership dispute. Those 96 houses became unsellable the moment it hit the recorder's office. They can finish construction, but they can't close sales or refinance. That's a cash flow nightmare." I felt a cold satisfaction hearing it. They'd ignored me when I showed up with my deed. Now they couldn't ignore the legal system. But winning this case required more than proving I owned the land. We needed documentation solid enough that no judge could question it. Theodore connected me with a surveyor named Leonard Fisher, a man in his early 60s who'd been doing boundary work in this county for 30 years. Leonard drove out to Riverside Meadows on a Saturday morning with GPS equipment and a copy of my original 1992 survey. I met him at the entrance. He didn't waste time on small talk. "Show me where your corners were," he said. We walked the perimeter together. He set up his equipment near what should have been the southwest corner and started taking readings. After 20 minutes, he called me over and showed me the overlay on his tablet. The original property lines glowed in red. The HOA development sat inside them completely. "Your deed describes a parcel beginning at this point and running north along the ridgeline," Leonard said, tracing the screen with one finger. "The HOA development sits entirely within those bounds. Not partially, entirely. Whoever filed their site plan either ignored the existing serve or deliberately used false coordinates." He looked up at me. "I'll have a full report ready in a week. Signed, sealed, and detailed enough that any judge will understand they built on your land without ambiguity." That report would carry weight. Surveyors aren't advocates. They're neutral technical witnesses. When Leonard testified that every house sat on my property, it wouldn't be an opinion. It would be a measurable fact. Theodore had also requested financial documentation showing active management of the property. I pulled together everything I had. The timber harvest contract from 5 years ago, with the check made out to me. Insurance policies on the cabin list me as the sole insured party. Utility bills from the Rural Electric Co-op. When I brought the file to Theodore's office, he spread it across his conference table and nodded. "This kills any abandonment argument. You were managing timber, maintaining structures, and paying for services. You were gone for a year because your mother was dying, not because you surrendered the land." He tapped the insurance policy. "This is especially good. You can't insure property you don't own or intend to keep." He leaned back in his chair. "Now we go after the shell company, Riverside Development Group LLC. Every LLC files formation documents with the state. I pulled theirs." He handed me a printout. "The registered agent is a lawyer named Marcus Hale, but the actual member listed is another LLC. They've layered it. That's a red flag. People don't hide behind multiple corporate veils unless they're obscuring something." I stared at the name. Can we find out who's really behind it? Theodore nodded. If we can show the LLC was created to commit fraud, we can pierce the corporate veil, but that takes evidence linking someone in the HOA directly to Riverside Development Group. If Francine Blackwood isn't just a buyer but an architect of this scheme, her good faith defense collapses. That night, I started digging through public records online. Property transactions are public. Business filings are public. If there was a connection, it would be somewhere in the data. I searched for properties owned by Francine Blackwood in the county database. 3 results came up: a home in a nearby suburb, a vacation condo 2 counties over, and a commercial property listed under her name from 8 years ago, later transferred to an LLC called Blackwood Holdings. I pulled up the state business registry and searched for Blackwood Holdings, inactive since last year, but the registered agent on the formation documents was Marcus Hale. The same lawyer served as the registered agent for Riverside Development Group. It wasn't proof, but it was a connection. She'd used Hale before to set up corporate entities. That wasn't a coincidence. I called Theodore and told him what I'd found. That establishes a pattern, he said. She's worked with Hale on prior deals. If we get into discovery and subpoena her communications, we might find emails or contracts tying her directly to Riverside Development Group. That comes after we file the full lawsuit, but this gives us a direction. He paused. Russell, I need to be straight with you. This is going to get expensive. Forensic accountants, handwriting experts, depositions. The upfront costs for expert witnesses alone could run from $15,000 to $20,000. I can work on contingency for my fees, but the experts need to be paid regardless of outcome. I looked around my small rented apartment. I had savings. My father had taught me to live carefully. Do what you need to do, I said. I'm not walking away because I couldn't afford the fight. The next morning, Theodore filed the lawsuit. Russell Hampton versus Riverside Development Group LLC, Francine Blackwood, and Riverside Meadows Homeowners Association. The claims were direct quiet title, fraud, trespass, and unjust enrichment. We were asking the court to declare me the rightful owner and order them to cease all activity on the property. The lawsuit hit the local news that afternoon. Theodore sent me a summary. The coverage called it a shocking land dispute involving nearly 100 families. Francine Blackwood declined to comment. An HOA spokesperson said they were confident in their legal position and had relied on proper title work, but I knew the lis pendens was doing damage behind those confident statements. Construction could finish, but the houses couldn't sell. Banks wouldn't finance clouded titles. Buyers wouldn't close. Every day that passed was another day of carrying costs with no revenue. And every day brought me closer to standing in front of a judge with a surveyor's report, a stack of tax receipts, and a forged signature that someone was going to have to explain. The response came faster than Theodore expected. 10 days after we filed the lawsuit, the HOA's legal team hit back with a motion to dismiss and a counterclaim, alleging I'd filed a frivolous suit to extort a settlement, seeking sanctions and attorney's fees against me personally. Theodore read the filing in his office and set it down. This is a pressure tactic, he said. They're trying to scare you into backing off. The allegations are baseless. You have a recorded deed, continuous tax payments, and a survey proving they built on your land. That's the opposite of frivolous. But defending against it will cost time and money, and that's the point. He tapped the papers. There's something else. They've scheduled a special HOA meeting tomorrow night at 7 p.m., open to all residents. I'd bet Francine Blackwood is planning to rally the homeowners against you. I hadn't considered that angle. 96 families living in those houses, people who'd taken out mortgages and believed they were buying legitimate property. Now their titles were clouded, and they were being told it was because of me. Francine would use that fear. Should I go to the meeting? I asked. Theodore leaned back in his chair. Normally I'd say no. Don't engage directly, but if you don't show, she controls the narrative completely. If you do, you'll face a hostile crowd, but you'll have a chance to present your side. It's your call. I thought about it. Those homeowners had bought houses on stolen land, but they were victims too. And if this was going to be a public fight, I wasn't going to hide. The meeting was held in the clubhouse at the center of Riverside Meadows. A large open room with folding chairs arranged in rows. I arrived 15 minutes early. The room was already filling up. Families, couples, all of them looking tense and worried. Conversations buzzed around me. Someone mentioned property values. Someone else mentioned refinancing being blocked. A woman near the front was crying softly while her husband rubbed her shoulder. I took a seat in the back. Francine Blackwood stood at a table up front, speaking quietly with two men in suits. One of them I recognized from the business filings. Marcus Hale, the lawyer who'd served as registered agent for Riverside Development Group. Seeing him here wasn't a surprise, but it confirmed he was actively involved, not just a name on paperwork. At 7 p.m. sharp, Francine called the meeting to order. Her voice carried calm authority. Thank you all for coming. I know many of you have concerns about the lawsuit filed against our community. I want to provide clarity on where we stand. She gestured to the men beside her. This is Marcus Hale, our legal counsel, and David Brenner, representing Riverside Development Group. They're here to answer questions and reassure you that your homes and investments are secure. She paused. 2 weeks ago, Russell Hampton filed a lawsuit claiming he owns the land this community is built on. His claim is based on an old deed that was legally superseded when the property was sold and developed. We have title insurance. We have county approval. We followed every requirement. Mr. Hampton's lawsuit is an attempt to leverage a technicality into a payout, and we will not allow it to succeed. The room erupted in murmurs. Eyes turned, searching. Someone near the middle noticed me and pointed. The murmurs grew louder. Francine raised a hand for quiet. Mr. Hampton is here tonight. If he'd like to explain to these families why he's trying to take their homes, I'm sure we'd all be interested. Her tone was polite, but the challenge was unmistakable. I stood up slowly. The room went silent. I didn't have a prepared speech, but I wasn't going to let her frame this as extortion. My name is Russell Hampton, I said, keeping my voice steady. That land has been in my family since 1983. I've paid taxes on it every year, maintained it, and insured it. I left for 1 year to care for my dying mother. When I came back, I found 96 houses on property I never sold. The deed Ms. Blackwood mentioned was forged. My signature was notarized by someone who now refuses to explain how he witnessed a signing I never attended. I let that sit for a moment. I'm not trying to take anyone's home. I'm trying to get back what was stolen from me. You're victims of the same fraud I am. The difference is, I have proof of ownership, and the people who sold you these houses don't. The room stayed silent. Then a man in the third row stood up. If what you're saying is true, what happens to us? We bought in good faith. Are you going to evict 96 families? It was the question I'd been dreading. I don't want to evict anyone, I said. But I can't pretend my land was legally sold when it wasn't. What I want is for the people responsible for this fraud to be held accountable. The HOA, the development company, and anyone who knew this was illegal need to face consequences. As for homeowners, I'm hoping we can find a solution that protects your investments without erasing my rights. But that requires good faith negotiation. And right now, the HOA is spending more energy attacking me than fixing the problem. Francine's expression tightened. Mr. Hampton, you filed a lis pendens that froze property values and blocked sales across this community. You've cost these families tens of thousands and created chaos. That's not the action of someone interested in negotiation. I met her eyes. I filed a lis pendens because it's the legal mechanism to protect my claim while the case is heard. If your title work was as solid as you claim, it wouldn't matter. The fact that it does suggests your confidence is misplaced. Marcus Hale stood then, his voice smooth and practiced. Mr. Hampton, the title insurance policy covering this development is ironclad, even if there were irregularities in the chain of title, which we dispute. The insurance would cover any claims. Your lawsuit will fail, and these families will be protected. The only person who stands to lose here is you, along with your legal fees. His tone was dismissive, designed to make me look foolish, but he'd just given me something. He'd admitted, however carefully, that there might be irregularities. That was a crack. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, the lines clearly drawn. Most of the homeowners were scared and angry, and Francine had directed that anger toward me effectively. but a few people approached me afterward. Quieter, asking questions. One couple said they'd had trouble getting clear answers about the title insurance. Another man mentioned discrepancies in his plat map at closing. They weren't allies, but they were starting to doubt the story they'd been sold. I left the clubhouse and sat in my truck, adrenaline still coursing through me. Theodore had been right. It was hostile, but showing up had been the right move. I'd put a face to the lawsuit and forced Francine and her lawyer to respond publicly. Marcus Hale's comment about irregularities would look very different when we proved deliberate fraud. And those small doubts I'd seen in a few faces, those quiet questions afterward, those were the beginning of cracks in the unified front Francine was trying to maintain. She'd expected me to be a faceless aggressor. Instead, I'd stood in front of them and told the truth. That mattered. Not to everyone, but to enough. The fight was far from over, but for the first time since I'd come back to find my forest gone, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. The truth was on my side, and slowly, people were starting to see it. 3 weeks after the HOA meeting, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was female, quiet, hesitant. "Mr. Hampton, my name is Monica Reeves. I work in the accounting department for the Riverside Meadows HOA. I need to talk to you about something, but not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere private?" My pulse quickened. "What is this about?" I asked. She paused. "I have documents, emails, things that show Ms. Blackwood knew about the title problems before construction even started. But if anyone finds out I contacted you, I'll lose my job. Please, I need to show you this." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop 2 towns over, far enough that no one from Riverside Meadows would randomly see us. I arrived 15 minutes early and took a table in the back corner. Monica showed up exactly on time. A woman in her mid-30s with nervous eyes and a messenger bag clutched tightly to her chest. She sat down across from me and glanced around before speaking. "I've been handling the books for the HOA since the development started. Accounts payable, vendor payments, all of it. A few months ago, I started noticing payments to shell companies and consulting fees that seemed excessive, so I started digging through the email archive." She pulled a folder from her bag and slid it across the table. "These are printed copies of emails between Francine Blackwood and Marcus Hale from before construction began. They knew your deed was still active. They discussed how to handle it." I opened the folder. The first email was dated February of last year, a month before the forged deed transfer. The subject line read, "Title Issue Resolution." Francine had written, "Marcus." The surveyor flagged a conflicting deed on the northern parcel, registered to a Russell Hampton. "Tax payments are current through this year. We need this cleared before we can start grading. Can your contact at the recorder's office expedite a quiet transfer? We're on a tight schedule and can't afford delays. If Hampton is out of state, we may have a window." Marcus Hale's response was brief. "I'll handle it. Give me 2 weeks. Make sure the surveyor understands discretion is essential." My hands tightened on the paper. They knew I owned the land. They'd taken it anyway. Monica pointed to another email dated March. Francine asked Marcus if there was any risk of me finding out before construction finished. His reply was cold and calculated. "Even if Hampton returns and files a claim, we'll be protected by good faith purchaser laws once units are sold. Worst case, we settle for a fraction of the property value. Fighting a completed development is too expensive for one person. Proceed as planned." I looked up at Monica. "Why are you giving this to me?" She met my eyes. "Because it's not right. I thought I was working for a legitimate organization. Those families living there have no idea what was done. You deserve to know. They deserve to know." I took photos of every email with my phone, then slid the folder back. "I need to give these to my lawyer. Are you willing to testify and confirm these are authentic?" She hesitated. "If I testify, I'll be fired. Probably sued." I understood the risk. "I can't promise it won't be hard," I said. "But these emails prove deliberate fraud. With this, we can go after Francine and Marcus personally and destroy their good faith defense. You'd be protecting those families from the people who lied to them." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll do it. But I need a lawyer too." I told her Theodore could recommend someone who specialized in whistleblower protection. We exchanged contact information, and she left quickly. I drove straight to Theodore's office. He was working late. I walked in and dropped my phone on his desk. "You need to see this." I showed him the photos of the emails. He read through them in silence, his expression hardening. When he finished, he looked up. "This changes everything. This is evidence of conspiracy to defraud. It shows intent, knowledge, and coordination between Blackwood and Hale. With these, we're not just fighting a title dispute anymore. We're looking at criminal charges, wire fraud, conspiracy, possibly forgery if we can tie the notary into this network." He leaned forward. "We need to take this to the district attorney first. Let them open a criminal investigation. Once that's in motion, we use it as leverage in the civil case. The HOA's lawyers will know their clients are facing criminal exposure, and that makes settlement far more attractive than trial." I felt the pieces clicking into place. "How long will an investigation take?" Theodore shook his head. "Months, maybe longer. White-collar cases move slowly, but the moment the DA opens a file, everything shifts. Prosecutors love cooperating witnesses with documentation." He tapped the phone screen. "Monica Reeves just handed us the smoking gun." I left his office with a strange mix of exhaustion and clarity. For weeks, I'd been fighting uphill against a system designed to protect people like Francine Blackwood. Every step forward had been met with legal maneuvers and public attacks. But now, the ground had shifted. Monica's emails proved this wasn't a mistake or negligence. It was a calculated theft. The good faith defense Francine had been hiding behind was built on a foundation of lies, and those lies were now documented in her own words. I thought about the HOA meeting, the families who'd looked at me with fear and anger, who'd been told I was the threat to their homes. They'd been manipulated just like I had. When the truth came out, they'd see that Francine hadn't been protecting them. She'd been protecting herself, using their fear as a shield while she tried to bury the evidence of what she'd done. The anger I'd carried for weeks began to transform into something colder and more focused. Patience, strategy, the long game. Theodore had advised from the beginning. They'd built 96 houses on my land, thinking they'd gotten away with it, thinking I'd be too overwhelmed or too poor to fight back. They'd miscalculated. And now, with Monica's courage and those emails, the walls were closing in. The collapse wouldn't be immediate, but it was coming. And when it arrived, it would be thorough. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. in the county courthouse. Theodore had filed an emergency motion to compel discovery and introduce the emails as evidence of fraud. The district attorney had opened a preliminary investigation based on Monica's testimony. But criminal cases move slowly. The civil case was our immediate battlefield. I arrived 30 minutes early wearing the only suit I owned. The courtroom was older, wood-paneled, with high ceilings and rows of benches. Theodore was already there, organizing documents at our table. Across the aisle, Marcus Hale sat with 2 associates and Francine Blackwood. She looked composed, but I noticed her hands were clasped tightly in her lap. Judge Patricia Kendall entered at 9 a.m. sharp, and we all stood. She was in her early 60s, with gray hair pulled back and a reputation for no-nonsense rulings. She reviewed the case file, then looked up. "This is a motion to compel discovery and to introduce additional evidence in the matter of Hampton versus Riverside Development Group and others. Mr. Brennan, you're moving to introduce emails obtained from a witness. Mr. Hale, you've filed an objection. Let's hear arguments." Theodore stood and approached the bench. His voice was calm and precise. "Your Honor, the plaintiff has obtained emails between the defendant, Francine Blackwood, and the registered agent for Riverside Development Group, Marcus Hale, that demonstrate they had actual knowledge of the plaintiff's valid deed before initiating the fraudulent transfer. These emails show premeditation, coordination, and intent to defraud. They directly contradict the defendant's claims of good faith purchase." He handed copies to the court clerk, who passed them to the judge. The emails discuss the conflicting deed, the need to expedite a quiet transfer, and strategies to minimize risk if the plaintiff discovered the fraud after construction was complete. We ask the court to admit these emails and to compel full discovery of all communications between Ms. Blackwood. Mr. Hale, the notary Gerald Hutchins, and any county officials involved in approving the development. Judge Kendall read through the emails without expression. The courtroom was silent. After several minutes, she looked up at Marcus Hale. "Mr. Hale, how did the plaintiff obtain these emails?" Hale stood, his courtroom demeanor firmly in place. "Your Honor, these emails were taken from a secure server by a disgruntled employee without authorization. They were obtained through what amounts to theft of proprietary business communications. We move to exclude them as inadmissible and potentially privileged attorney-client communications." Theodore didn't wait for permission to respond. "Your Honor, the emails were provided by a whistleblower who had authorized access to the HOA's accounting records. There was no hacking, no theft. Ms. Reeves was performing her job duties when she discovered evidence of fraud. As for privilege, these emails are not legal advice. There are discussions of how to execute a fraudulent land transfer. The crime-fraud exception applies. You cannot use attorney-client privilege to shield evidence of ongoing criminal conduct." Judge Kendall's eyes narrowed slightly. She looked back at the emails, then at Marcus Hale. "Mr. Hale, you're listed as a party to these communications, not as counsel providing legal advice. You're also the registered agent for the entity that allegedly purchased the property. That creates a significant conflict of interest if you're now representing that entity in litigation. Do you have a response?" Hale's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, my role as registered agent is purely administrative. I was not involved in the day-to-day operations of Riverside Development Group." Theodore interjected smoothly. "Then Mr. Hale should have no objection to being deposed under oath about his purely administrative role and these emails discussing how to handle the plaintiff's deed." The judge raised a hand. "Mr. Brennan, I didn't recognize you, but I'll allow it. Mr. Hale, you're in a precarious position here. If you're a witness to the alleged fraud, you cannot also serve as counsel for the defendants. You need to retain separate representation or withdraw from this case. You have until the end of business today to file a notice of withdrawal or a motion to clarify your role." She turned her attention to the emails again. "As for these communications, I'm admitting them into evidence. The crime-fraud exception applies. These are not protected legal advice. They discuss deliberate circumvention of property law. Mr. Brennan, your motion to compel discovery is granted. The defendants will produce all communications related to the acquisition and development of the property, including any correspondence with county officials, the notary, and any surveyors or title companies involved. You have 30 days. She looked directly at Francine Blackwood. "Ms. Blackwood, I'm also ordering you to appear for a deposition within 2 weeks. This court takes allegations of fraud seriously. Given the evidence presented today, I'm accelerating this case. We'll set a trial date for 3 months from now. If additional evidence of fraud emerges during discovery, I will consider sanctions up to and including a default judgment. Court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Theodore turned to me with a tight smile. "Kendall just dismantled their entire defense. Hale has to withdraw, which means they need new counsel and lose time. More importantly, we have court-ordered access to everything they've been hiding." As we walked out of the courtroom, I saw Francine in the hallway talking urgently with Marcus Hale. Their body language was tight, defensive. Whatever confidence they'd projected was gone. Outside on the courthouse steps, Theodore stopped. "Russell, this is the turning point. They're going to come with a settlement offer now. The question is whether you want to settle or go to trial." I thought about my father buying that land in 1983, about the years I'd spent managing it, about coming home to find it stolen. "I want them to answer for what they did," I said. "In public, on the record, I want a verdict." Theodore nodded. "Then that's what we'll get." The trial lasted 3 days. The courtroom was packed with reporters, homeowners from Riverside Meadows, and locals who'd followed the case. Theodore presented our evidence methodically. Leonard Fisher testified about the survey, explaining how every house sat entirely within my property boundaries. Tax records, insurance policies, and utility bills established continuous ownership. Monica Reeves took the stand on day 2 and walked the jury through the emails, her voice steady despite hostile stares from Francine's side. The handwriting expert showed side-by-side comparisons, proving the signature on the forged deed was fake. Francine's lawyers argued she'd relied on professionals, that she'd been misled by Marcus Hale and the title company. But the emails destroyed that defense. Her own words proved she'd known about my deed and actively worked to circumvent it. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. They found in my favor on all counts: quiet title, fraud, trespass, and unjust enrichment. The judge awarded me full ownership and ordered Riverside Development Group and Francine Blackwood to pay $8 million in compensatory damages plus $3 million in punitive damages. The courtroom erupted. Francine sat frozen, her face drained of color, but the judge addressed the homeowners directly. Mr. Hampton is the rightful owner. However, I'm ordering a 60-day stay on eviction proceedings to allow for negotiated resolutions. The homeowners acted in good faith. They are victims of this fraud. I encourage Mr. Hampton and the residents to work together on a solution that protects their investments while respecting his rights. I'd already decided what to do. Theodore had helped me draft an offer before the verdict. I would sell each homeowner the land beneath their house at fair pre-development value, roughly $12,000 per quarter-acre lot, clear title for them, compensation for me, and an end to the nightmare for everyone except those who'd caused it. Within a month, 89 of the 96 families accepted. The criminal case moved forward. Francine Blackwood was charged with conspiracy to defraud and forgery. Marcus Hale with conspiracy and accessory charges. Gerald Hutchins with falsifying documents. All 3 accepted plea deals. Francine received 2 years in prison and was barred from serving on any HOA board. Hale was disbarred and sentenced to 18 months. Hutchins lost his notary license and received probation. The county official who'd fast-tracked the permits resigned before charges were filed. I used part of the settlement to pay Theodore's fees and reimburse Monica Reeves. She found work with a nonprofit investigating HOA fraud. The rest went toward buying land in a neighboring county, somewhere quiet where I could rebuild. Sometimes justice takes time. It takes patience, documentation, and courage to stand up when everyone tells you to back down. But when it comes, when truth breaks through the lies, it's worth every sleepless night. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt powerless against a system protecting the powerful, leave a comment and let me know. And if you want more stories about standing up for what's right, about karma, catching up to those who think they're untouchable, subscribe to Karma Neighbors. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Because the truth always finds a way, and justice, when it arrives, is worth witnessing.